Marriage is supposed to be a sanctuary, a place where two people build something stronger than either could create alone. For 15 years, I believed in that sanctuary. I believed in the promises we made, the life we constructed, and the future we planned together. My name is David Mitchell, and I'm a 42-year-old civil engineer living in Charlotte, North Carolina. I thought I had it all figured out. A beautiful wife named Jessica, two incredible kids, Emma, 13, and Tyler, 10, a comfortable home in a good neighborhood, and a career that provided stability and security. I wasn't naive enough to think marriage was easy, but I believed that commitment, communication, and effort could weather any storm. I was wrong. Not about marriage in general, but about mine specifically. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. There's no warning siren, no flashing lights, no moment where the universe taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you might want to pay attention to this." Instead, it creeps in through hairline fractures in your daily routine, small inconsistencies that your brain registers but dismisses because acknowledging them would mean confronting a reality you're not ready to face. A phone tilted away at an odd angle, a new password on a device that used to be shared freely, unexplained errands that take twice as long as they should, conversations that stop abruptly when you enter a room. These weren't red flags to me initially. They were just the background noise of a busy household where everyone had their own lives and responsibilities. Jessica worked as a marketing director for a mid-sized pharmaceutical company, a position she'd worked hard to achieve after years of climbing the corporate ladder. I was proud of her ambition and success. Our schedules were demanding, but we made it work, or so I thought. We had date nights when we could manage them, family dinners most evenings, and weekend activities with the kids. From the outside, we probably looked like the American dream personified. But somewhere along the way, while I was focused on mortgage payments, school projects, and quarterly reports, the foundation of that dream had started to rot from within. The discovery came on a Tuesday evening in late September, unremarkable in every way except for what it would ultimately represent. The moment my life split into a clear before and after. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't suspicious or paranoid. I was simply trying to find the charger for my laptop, which had mysteriously disappeared from my home office. Jessica was at what she'd called a client dinner, something that had become increasingly frequent over the past 6 months. The kids were doing homework in their rooms, and I was searching through the usual places where things in our house tended to migrate: the kitchen drawer of miscellaneous items, the living room side table, the bedroom nightstand. That's where I found it. Jessica's iPad, sitting on her nightstand, screen illuminated with a notification. I wouldn't have looked. I respected her privacy, always had. But the preview text was visible, and my own name caught my eye. "Is David suspicious yet?" The message was from someone listed only as J in her contacts. My stomach dropped before my brain could fully process why. I picked up the device, and because we'd always shared passcodes, or so I believed, I entered what I thought was her current password. It didn't work. She'd changed it. That single failed attempt told me more than any message could have. In 15 years of marriage, we'd never hidden our devices from each other. There was no reason to. Or there shouldn't have been. I stood there in our bedroom holding that iPad, feeling the first real tremor of fear work its way through my chest. Part of me wanted to put it down, to walk away, to preserve whatever remained of my ignorance. But that message, "Is David suspicious yet?" had already done its damage. The question wasn't whether something was wrong. The question was how bad it actually was. I didn't sleep that night. Jessica came home around 11:30, smelling faintly of wine and wearing a smile that seemed too bright, too practiced. She kissed my cheek, asked about the kids, and chatted about her evening with the kind of detail that, in retrospect, felt rehearsed. I responded on autopilot, my mind still circling that message, trying to find an innocent explanation that would make sense. Maybe Jay was a girlfriend, and they were planning a surprise for me. Maybe the message was taken out of context. Maybe I was overreacting to something completely benign. But I wasn't overreacting, and I knew it. 15 years of marriage gives you an instinct for your partner's rhythms, their patterns, their truths, and lies. Something fundamental had shifted, and I could feel it in the air between us like a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm. The next morning, I made a decision that would alter everything. I was going to find out the truth, whatever it was, wherever it led. I wasn't going to confront Jessica based on a single text message preview. I wasn't going to accuse or assume. But I also wasn't going to ignore what I'd seen. I would investigate quietly, carefully, and thoroughly. If I was wrong, if there was some reasonable explanation, then I'd deal with my own paranoia and we'd move forward. But if I was right, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with before I made any decisions about what came next. I had no idea then just how deep the deception ran, or how much worse things would get before they got better. I spent the next 3 days doing something I never imagined I'd do. I became a spy in my own home. The decision to wait, to observe rather than confront, went against every instinct I had. My natural inclination was to lay everything on the table, to demand answers, to force the truth into the open where we could deal with it. But something held me back. Maybe wisdom, maybe cowardice. I told myself it was strategy. If Jessica was hiding something significant, a premature confrontation would only give her time to construct a better story, to delete evidence, to coordinate with whoever Jay was. So I watched, and I listened, and I documented. The first thing I did was install a recovery app on my laptop that could potentially retrieve deleted messages from Jessica's phone during her next backup. I'd read about it in some tech article years ago, filed away in the back of my mind as interesting but irrelevant. Now it felt essential. The app ran silently in the background, waiting for the next time Jessica connected her phone to our shared computer. The second thing I did was start paying attention to patterns. Jessica had always been a creature of habit. It was one of the things I'd found endearing about her. Coffee at 6:30 a.m., exactly 2 creams. Gym on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Client meetings typically scheduled for late afternoons. But now I began tracking these patterns with the precision I normally reserved for load calculations and structural stress points. I created a simple spreadsheet disguised in a folder labeled Project Timesheets, where Jessica would never think to look. Each evening, I'd note what time she left work, what time she arrived home, what reasons she gave for any delays. I recorded which nights she checked her phone obsessively and which nights it sat untouched. I noted when she smiled at her screen and when her expression went carefully blank. The data began to tell a story. Tuesday evening, Jessica came home at 7:45 p.m., claiming the client dinner had run long. She was wearing the same outfit she'd left in that morning, but her makeup had been refreshed. I could tell because the shade of lipstick was slightly different from the one she'd applied at her bathroom mirror before work. Small detail. Easy to miss if you weren't looking. Wednesday, she worked from home. I'd taken the day off, claiming I needed to handle some personal business. Instead, I stayed in my home office, listening. Jessica spent most of the morning on legitimate work calls. I could hear the familiar corporate speak, the discussion of market demographics and campaign strategies. But around 2 p.m., her voice changed. Softer. More intimate. The words were too muffled to make out clearly through the walls, but the tone was unmistakable. When she emerged for a coffee refill, I asked casually, "How's the Brennan account going?" "Fine," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Just the usual challenges." "That was Brennan you were talking to?" A microsecond of hesitation. "No, that was Lisa from the design team. Why?" "No reason. Just sounded like you were working through something complicated." She smiled. One of those practice smiles I'd started to recognize. "Just the usual office politics. Nothing interesting." I nodded and returned to my screen, where I'd been pretending to review blueprints. I added the interaction to my spreadsheet. 2:15 p.m., 15-minute call, intimate tone. Claimed Lisa from design. Verify if possible. Thursday brought the first major break. Jessica had a late meeting, or so she said. She'd mentioned it that morning over breakfast, her tone casual, almost bored. Don't wait up. The Sanderson presentation is tomorrow and we're nowhere near ready. Probably looking at a 10 or 11 p.m. finish. Want me to save you some dinner? I'll grab something at the office. Thanks, though. She kissed my cheek, the gesture automatic, and I caught a whiff of her perfume. The expensive one. The one she usually saved for important occasions. After she left, I sat in the quiet house. Emma was at a friend's house, Tyler at soccer practice, and made a decision I'm still not entirely comfortable with. I drove to Jessica's office building in downtown Charlotte. I didn't have a plan, exactly. I told myself I just wanted to see if she was actually there, if the lights in her office were on, if her car was in its assigned spot. Confirmation, that's all. Just data points for my spreadsheet. Her car was there, silver Lexus gleaming under the parking garage lights. I felt a momentary relief, followed immediately by self-disgust. What was I doing? Stalking my own wife like some jealous teenager? I was about to leave when I saw her. Jessica emerged from the building's main entrance at 8:30 p.m., but she wasn't alone. She was walking with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, maybe mid-40s, expensive suit. They were laughing about something, her hand briefly touching his arm in a gesture that could have been friendly or could have been something more. They stopped at her car, talked for another 5 minutes. I was parked 3 rows away, far enough that I couldn't hear the conversation, but close enough to see Jessica's body language. Relaxed, animated. The way she used to look when we first started dating, before marriage and mortgages and the comfortable routine of long-term partnership, had settled over us like a warm blanket. The man said something that made her laugh. Really laugh, head thrown back, genuine delight. Then he leaned in and kissed her cheek. Lingered just a fraction too long. Pulled back with a smile that suggested intimacy, inside jokes, shared secrets. Jessica got in her car. The man walked to a black BMW 3 spaces down. They left separately, within minutes of each other. I sat in my car for another 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what I'd seen. It could have been innocent. Colleagues saying goodbye after a long work session. The kiss could have been European style, professional, meaningless. But I knew. The way you know when a structure is compromised, when the stress points are all wrong, when failure is inevitable even if it hasn't happened yet. I knew. Jessica arrived home at 9:15 p.m., carrying her laptop bag and looking appropriately exhausted. God, what a night, she said, dropping her bag by the door. I'm dead on my feet. How'd the presentation prep go? Brutal. We're still not where we need to be, but at least we have a framework now. She headed for the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine. How are the kids? Good. Tyler's team won 3-1. Emma's still at Madison's. I said I'd pick her up by 10. You're the best. She kissed my forehead, the gesture absent, automatic. I'm going to take a quick shower and crash. Tomorrow's going to be even worse. I watched her climb the stairs, wine glass in hand, and felt something shift inside me. The uncertainty of the past few days crystallized into cold clarity. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity or midlife crisis or any of the other explanations I'd been half hoping for. My wife was having an affair. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I opened my laptop and added the evening's observations to my spreadsheet. Then I opened a new document and titled it simply, Options. Confrontation was the obvious choice, but confrontation required evidence, and right now all I had were suspicions and circumstantial observations. A 15-minute phone call in an intimate tone. A kiss on the cheek that lasted too long. None of it was proof. I needed more. I needed certainty. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before I made any moves. So I would continue watching, continue documenting. And when I finally confronted Jessica, I would do it from a position of complete knowledge, with evidence she couldn't deny and explanations she couldn't fabricate. I heard the shower turn off upstairs, heard Jessica moving around in our bedroom, heard the familiar sounds of our evening routine continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I just needed to prove it. The recovery software worked its way through Jessica's deleted messages while I sat in my office Wednesday morning, ostensibly reviewing structural calculations for a mixed-use development downtown. The progress bar crept forward with maddening slowness, 37%, 38%, 39%, while I refreshed my email every 30 seconds, waiting for the automated report. My phone buzzed. Jessica. Hey, I forgot to mention. I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon. Nothing serious, just a checkup I've been putting off. I kept my voice neutral. What time? 2:30. I should be back by 4. Another appointment I could verify. Another data point for my spreadsheet. Hope everything's okay. Of course, just routine. A pause. David, have you noticed anything off about me lately? My hand tightened on the phone. Off how? I don't know. I've been forgetting things. Little things, mostly. Where I put my keys, whether I took my vitamins. Yesterday, I completely blanked on the name of that Italian restaurant we love. You know, the one on Providence Road? Vivus. We'd celebrated our 10th anniversary there. Everyone forgets things, I said carefully. I know, but it's been happening more often. I'm probably just stressed with work. She sighed. Anyway, I wanted to give you a heads up about the appointment. Love you. Love you too. I sat staring at the phone after she hung up. Memory problems. Forgetting things. The timing struck me as remarkably convenient. Planting seeds for some future excuse, perhaps? Or was I reading conspiracy into genuine concern? The email notification chimed. The recovery software had pulled 847 deleted text messages spanning 3 months. I downloaded the encrypted file, transferred it to my personal laptop, and locked my office door. The messages painted a portrait of betrayal in high resolution. The contact labeled J was actually stored in her phone as Jason Brennan. The texts began innocuously enough in early July, work-related exchanges about a pharmaceutical marketing conference in Atlanta. Professional, courteous, forgettable. Then, dated July 18th, the tone shifted. Jason. That presentation was incredible. You have a gift for making complex data compelling. Jessica. Coming from you, that means a lot. Your keynote was inspiring. Jason. Dinner tonight? There's a place I think you'd appreciate. Nothing fancy, just good food and better conversation. Jessica. I shouldn't. Jason. No pressure, just 2 colleagues who happen to enjoy talking to each other. Jessica. Okay, 7:30? I remembered July 18th. Jessica had called to say the conference was running late, that she'd grab dinner with some colleagues and take a morning flight instead of the red-eye. I'd put the kids to bed alone, watched half a baseball game, fallen asleep on the couch. The messages after that dinner multiplied. Good morning texts. Links to articles with "thought you'd find this interesting" notes. Inside jokes I didn't understand. The language grew warmer, more familiar. Pet names emerged. She called him JB. He called her Jess. Nobody called her Jess. She'd always insisted she preferred Jessica. August brought escalation. Jason. I can't stop thinking about last night. Jessica. Me neither. This is complicated. Jason. I know, but when something feels this right? Jessica. It's not fair to David, or your wife. He was married. Of course he was married. Jason. Some things transcend fair. Some connections are too rare to ignore. Jessica. I need time to think. Jason. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. 3 days of silence. Then. Jessica. Can you meet tomorrow? Usual place? The usual place appeared to be a wine bar called Amelie's, based on subsequent context clues. They met there at least twice a week through August and September. The messages detailed their developing relationship with the kind of intimate specificity that made my stomach turn. But it was a conversation from September 15th, just 2 weeks ago, that stopped me cold. Jessica. David's been acting strange lately, watching me more carefully. Jason. Is he suspicious? Jessica. I don't know. Maybe I'm paranoid. Jason. We should be more careful. Jessica. I know. I just hate lying to him. He's a good man. Jason. Then why are you doing this? Jessica. Because I can't help it. Because you make me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Jason. Leave him. We could be together properly. Jessica. It's not that simple. There are the kids, the house, our whole life together. And David doesn't deserve this. Jason. But you deserve to be happy. Jessica. Do I? Sometimes I'm not sure. I read that exchange 3 times, searching for some context that would make it hurt less. There wasn't one. The most recent messages from yesterday were brief. Jason. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Jessica. Me too. I have so much to tell you. Jason. Good things? Jessica. I hope so. I'm going to talk to my doctor about these memory issues. Maybe get some tests done. Jason. Want me to come with you? Jessica. Better not, but thank you for offering. You're sweet. Jason. 2:30. At Amelie's after? Jessica. Perfect. I checked the time. 11:47 a.m. In less than 3 hours, my wife would finish her doctor's appointment and meet her lover at a wine bar for an afternoon rendezvous. I could confront her now, walk into her office, throw the evidence in her face, demand answers and apologies and explanations that wouldn't satisfy, or I could verify one more piece of the puzzle. Amelie's occupied a renovated brick building in the Dilworth neighborhood, all exposed beams and Edison bulbs and reclaimed wood. The kind of place that served wine in oversized glasses and described everything on the menu as artisanal. I'd never been inside. I arrived at 2:15, parking 3 spaces down from Jessica's Lexus. She was already here. Through the large front windows, I could see her sitting at a corner table, glass of white wine catching the afternoon light. She wore the navy dress from this morning, the one that made her eyes look darker. Her phone sat face down on the table. She checked her watch. At 2:32, a man walked in. Tall, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair styled with the casual precision of someone who paid attention to such things. Well-tailored charcoal suit, no tie. He spotted Jessica immediately, and his face transformed. The kind of genuine smile you can't fake. The kind that reaches the eyes and softens the whole expression. Jason Brennan, I presumed. Jessica stood. He crossed to her in 3 long strides and pulled her into an embrace that lasted several seconds too long for colleagues. When they separated, his hand lingered at the small of her back as they sat. I couldn't hear their conversation through the glass, but I could read the body language fluently. The way she leaned forward, engaged and animated. The way he touched her hand across the table. The way she laughed, head back, unself-conscious, in a manner I hadn't seen in months. They looked happy. They looked right together. The observation didn't hurt any less for being true. I watched them for 45 minutes. Watched him order a bottle of wine. Watched them share a charcuterie board. Her feeding him a piece of cheese, him catching her wrist and kissing her palm. Watched the casual intimacy of two people completely comfortable with each other. At 3:20, Jessica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, typed a response, probably telling someone at work she'd be delayed. She showed Jason the screen, and they both laughed. Then she did something that crystallized my next move. She pulled out a small notebook, the kind she used for important lists, the kind with her initials embossed on the leather cover, and began writing while talking to Jason. He nodded, added something, and she wrote more. They were planning something, coordinating, building a future that didn't include me. After several minutes, she tore out the page and handed it to him. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his jacket pocket. I took photos of everything. The embrace, the hand-holding, the kiss on her palm, the notebook. Every angle, every gesture, every piece of evidence that would matter later. At 3:45, they stood to leave. Another long embrace, this one accompanied by a kiss that started chaste and deepened into something that made me look away. I waited until they separated and headed for different cars before starting my engine. Jessica would arrive home around 4:30, I calculated. She'd tell me about her doctor's appointment, probably mention the memory concerns again, lay more groundwork for whatever story she was constructing. And I would smile and nod and ask concerned questions while the recording app on my phone captured every word. Because if Jessica wanted to play games with memory and truth, I'd give her exactly the rope she needed. The recording app was already running when I heard Jessica's car pull into the driveway at 6:47 p.m. I'd positioned my phone on the kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker, angled to capture the breakfast bar where we usually sat to talk. The screen showed the audio waveform pulsing with ambient noise, the refrigerator's hum, the settling of the house. I'd spent the afternoon preparing. Not just the recording setup, but myself. I'd rehearsed my questions in the mirror, practiced my concerned husband expression until it looked natural. The irony wasn't lost on me, learning to deceive the deceiver, wearing a mask to expose someone else's performance. The front door opened. Jessica's heels clicked across the hardwood, then stopped. I heard her set down her bag, the jingle of keys being dropped in the ceramic bowl on the entry table. "David, you home?" "Kitchen," I called back, keeping my voice neutral. She appeared in the doorway moments later, still in her work clothes, a charcoal blazer over a cream blouse, fitted slacks. Her makeup was perfect, freshly touched up. For Jason, I thought. Or maybe she'd actually gone to a doctor's appointment. Maybe both. "Hey," she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked tired. "How was your day?" "Good. Productive." I gestured to the stove where I'd started dinner. Nothing elaborate, just chicken and vegetables. "Thought I'd get a head start." "How was yours?" A microsecond of hesitation. "Busy, really busy." "The Mercer campaign still giving you trouble?" "Yeah, they keep changing their requirements." She moved to the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of white wine. I swear, pharmaceutical marketing gets more complicated every year. I watched her pour a glass, noting the slight tremor in her hand. Stress? Guilt? Or was I imagining things, seeing significance in every gesture? "You had that doctor's appointment today, right?" I kept my tone casual, concerned. "How'd it go?" Jessica took a sip of wine before answering. "It was fine, just routine." "Routine?" I frowned. "I thought you were worried about the memory stuff, forgetting things." "Oh, right." She set down her glass and I saw her shoulders tense. "Yeah, we talked about that. Dr. Patel said it's probably just stress. Work has been intense, you know? She suggested I try to cut back on my hours, maybe take some vacation time." Dr. Patel. A specific detail. Either she'd actually seen a doctor or she'd done her homework for the lie. I made a mental note to verify. There were only so many general practitioners in Charlotte. "That's good," I said. "That it's just stress, I mean." I was getting worried. You were worried. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe guilt. Of course. You're my wife, Jess. When you started forgetting things, talking about early onset dementia, I let my voice trail off, injecting just enough concern. I've been reading about it online. The symptoms, the progression. It's scary stuff. She looked away, focusing on her wine glass. I might have been overreacting. You know how it is. You Google one symptom and suddenly you're convinced you have some terrible disease. So what exactly did Dr. Patel say? Did she run any tests? Just the basic cognitive stuff. Remembering word lists, drawing a clock, that kind of thing. I passed everything fine. She took another sip. She said if I'm still having issues in a few months, we can do more comprehensive testing. But she really thinks it's just stress and lack of sleep. The lie flowed smoothly, each detail building on the last. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed her completely. She'd always been good at presentations, at crafting narratives that convinced people. It's what made her successful at work. What time was your appointment? I asked. 3:30. Why? Just wondering. I tried calling you around 4, but it went straight to voicemail. Another hesitation, barely perceptible. Oh yeah, I had my phone off in the doctor's office. You know how they are about that. And then afterward, I had to run to the pharmacy to pick up the supplements she recommended. Supplements? Vitamin B complex, omega-3s. She said they can help with cognitive function and stress management. Jessica moved toward me, placed a hand on my arm. Really, David, it's nothing to worry about. I'm fine. Her touch felt foreign, like a stranger's hand. I looked down at her fingers on my sleeve and wondered how many times she'd touched Jason the same way. How many lies had she told while maintaining that same earnest expression? I'm glad, I said. I've been really concerned about you lately. I know. I'm sorry I worried you. She squeezed my arm, then moved away to check on the dinner. This looks great. Where are the kids? Emma's at soccer practice until 7:30. Tyler's at Brandon's house. They're working on a science project. I said I'd pick him up around 8. So we have the house to ourselves for a bit. She smiled, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd married. Or thought I'd married. That's nice. Yeah. I turned back to the stove, stirring the vegetables to give myself something to do. Hey, while I'm thinking about it, our anniversary is coming up soon. I was thinking we could plan something special this year. Silence behind me. I counted 3 seconds before she responded. Our anniversary? I turned around, keeping my expression neutral. Yeah. I know we usually just do dinner, but 15 years feels like a milestone. I thought maybe we could do a weekend away? There's that bed and breakfast in Asheville you've always wanted to try. Jessica's face had gone carefully blank. When is our anniversary again? My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice steady. You're kidding, right? No, God, this is embarrassing. She pressed her fingers to her temple. See, this is exactly what I was talking about. I know it's in the fall, but the exact date just... I'm blanking. October 23rd, I said quietly. 3 weeks from now. Right. Of course. October 23rd. She shook her head, looking genuinely distressed. This is what I mean about the memory issues. I can't believe I forgot our anniversary date. I watched her performance with a kind of detached fascination. The concern, the embarrassment, the self-reproach, all perfectly calibrated. If I didn't know what I knew, I'd be comforting her right now, reassuring her that everyone forgets dates sometimes. Maybe Dr. Patel was wrong, I said. Maybe you should get those comprehensive tests after all. Maybe. She picked up her wine glass again, took a longer drink. Let's not worry about it right now. You said October 23rd. That gives me time to put it in my calendar with about 100 reminders. Sure. I plated the chicken, brought it to the breakfast bar. Come eat. We sat across from each other, the phone still recording between us, capturing every word. Jessica talked about work, the Mercer campaign, a conflict with her boss, budget concerns for next quarter. I listened and nodded and asked appropriate questions, all while mentally cataloging every word for future reference. She was good, frighteningly good. The details were specific enough to be believable, but vague enough that I couldn't easily verify them. She wove the truth and lies together seamlessly, creating a narrative that held together under casual scrutiny. But I'd heard her on the phone with Jason. I'd seen the recovered messages. I knew exactly how well she remembered our relationship timeline. She'd recounted it to him in excruciating detail, explaining how we'd met at a friend's wedding, how I'd proposed on a beach in the Outer Banks, how our wedding had been a small ceremony in her parents' backyard because we'd wanted intimate rather than elaborate. She remembered everything. She was just pretending not to. You seem distracted, Jessica said, pulling me from my thoughts. Just thinking about work. We've got a bridge inspection next week that's going to be complicated. Anything I can help with? I almost laughed. Not unless you've suddenly become an expert in structural engineering. Fair enough, she smiled. We all have our specialties. Yes, I thought. And yours is deception. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma saying practice was running late. She'd need pickup at 8 instead of 7:30. I showed Jessica the message. Guess we have more time, she said. Guess so. We finished dinner making small talk, discussing Tyler's science project and Emma's chances of making varsity next year. Normal conversation, the kind we'd had thousands of times before. Except now, every word felt weighted, significant. I found myself analyzing her phrasing, her tone, looking for hidden meanings that probably weren't there. When she excused herself to use the bathroom, I quickly stopped the recording and saved the file. 43 minutes of conversation, including her detailed lie about the doctor's appointment and her convenient forgetting of our anniversary date. I had what I needed. The question was what to do with it. I spent the next 3 days watching Jessica perform her elaborate charade with the detached fascination of a scientist observing a particularly deceptive specimen. Each forgotten detail, each moment of manufactured confusion, each apologetic smile, all of it cataloged, documented, and stored away in my growing archive of her deceit. On Friday evening, she outdid herself. We were at Emma's parent-teacher conference, sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs that make you feel like you're being punished for something. Mrs. Caldwell, Emma's English teacher, was praising our daughter's essay on the crucible when Jessica suddenly went still beside me. I'm sorry, she said, her voice carrying that perfect note of embarrassed confusion I'd come to recognize. Which teacher are we meeting with again? Mrs. Caldwell's smile faltered. I'm Mrs. Caldwell, Emma's English teacher. We've met several times this year. Of course, Jessica said, pressing her fingers to her temple. I'm so sorry. I've been having these moments lately where things just slip away. I watched Mrs. Caldwell's expression shift from confusion to concern. Jessica had just recruited another witness to her supposed decline. Brilliant, really. A teacher would make an excellent third-party observer if this ever came to a formal evaluation of her mental state. Are you seeing someone about this? Mrs. Caldwell asked gently. I have an appointment next week, Jessica lied smoothly. My husband has been so worried. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Her palm was cool and dry, not a tremor of genuine anxiety. I squeezed back and played my part. We're taking it seriously, making sure she gets the best care. The conference continued, but Mrs. Caldwell kept glancing at Jessica with that particular expression people get when they're watching someone they've mentally reclassified as fragile. After we left, I saw her make a note in her planner. Another piece of Jessica's false narrative, embedded in the world like a splinter. In the car, Emma was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Mom, are you really okay? I watched Jessica's face in the rearview mirror as she turned to our daughter. The concern in Emma's voice was genuine, and for just a second, less than a heartbeat, I saw something flicker across Jessica's features. Guilt? Shame? It vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little stressed with work. You know how it gets. But you said you couldn't remember. It's nothing serious, Jessica interrupted, her tone firm enough to close the conversation. Just Mom being silly. Emma subsided, but I could see the worry in the set of her shoulders. Tyler, mercifully, had been left with a babysitter and had missed this particular performance. Small mercies. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my office with my laptop and made a decision. If Jessica was building a narrative of cognitive decline, I needed to understand what she might be planning to do with it. The implications had been circling in my mind like sharks, and I needed to face them directly. I opened an incognito browser window and began to research. Early onset dementia, legal implications. Memory loss and legal capacity. Guardianship, North Carolina. The results were enlightening in the worst possible way. I learned that a person diagnosed with significant cognitive impairment could be declared legally incompetent. That a spouse could petition for guardianship, taking control of financial decisions, medical care, even basic life choices. I learned about the protections built into the system and the loopholes that existed for those willing to exploit them. But more importantly, I learned what Jessica might be positioning herself to claim. Diminished capacity divorce, North Carolina. Mental incompetence, adultery defense. My hands went still on the keyboard. There it was. The shape of her strategy, emerging from the fog like something monstrous. If she could establish a pattern of cognitive decline, documented by concerned teachers, sympathetic friends, perhaps eventually a complicit doctor, she could argue that any behavior, any decisions she'd made, were the result of her deteriorating mental state. Not her fault. Not her choice. Just the tragic consequence of a disease process beyond her control. An affair? She wasn't thinking clearly. Financial decisions? She was confused. Lies? She couldn't remember what was true. And if I tried to divorce her while she was sick, I would look like a monster. The man who abandoned his wife when she needed him most. Who put his own hurt feelings above her medical crisis. The court would view everything through that lens. My faithful, devoted wife, struck down by cruel fate, and her heartless husband who couldn't stand by her in her time of need. She'd get sympathy, understanding. Probably a very generous settlement because what kind of man divorces his mentally ill wife? I sat back in my chair, a cold admiration mixing with my disgust. It was elegant, really. A preemptive strike that would transform her from guilty party to victim. That would make me the villain in our story no matter what evidence I presented. The only flaw in her plan was that she didn't know I'd already seen behind the curtain. I pulled up the audio file from her fake doctor's appointment. Listened again to her voice, clear and sharp and completely coherent, as she talked to Jason about their plans. No confusion, no memory lapses. Just a woman conducting an affair with the organizational skills she'd honed in 15 years of corporate marketing. Then I opened the folder containing the recovered text messages and began reading through them again, this time with new eyes. Looking for anything that might indicate she'd discussed this strategy with Jason. I found it in a conversation from 2 weeks ago. Jason, your husband seems like the analytical type. What if he starts asking questions? Jessica, I'm handling it, building in some insurance. Jason, what kind of insurance? Jessica, the kind where I'm the victim no matter what happens. Trust me, I know how to manage a narrative. Jason, you're scary sometimes, in a good way. Jessica, That's why you love me. I read it 3 times, feeling something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. This wasn't just an affair. This was premeditated, calculated. She'd looked at our marriage, at me, at our children, and decided that her exit strategy required turning herself into a sympathetic figure while painting me as either a fool or a monster. The memory charade wasn't a panic response. It was phase 1 of a long-term plan. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my office, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, Jessica was probably already asleep, or perhaps texting Jason on the phone she thought was secure. Emma and Tyler were in their rooms, unaware that their mother was systematically constructing a false reality that would eventually tear our family apart. The question was, what did I do with this knowledge? I could confront her now, lay out everything I'd discovered. But she'd just deny it, claim I was paranoid, perhaps even use my accusations as further evidence that she needed to protect herself. The narrative would shift. Now I wasn't just the heartless husband, I was the unstable one, making wild claims about her faking an illness. Or I could continue gathering evidence, building an airtight case. But for what? A divorce where I proved she was lying about being sick? That still left me looking like the bad guy to everyone who didn't see the full picture. Or the thought arrived fully formed, shocking in its simplicity. Or I could give her exactly what she was pretending to have. If Jessica wanted to play the victim of cognitive decline, if she wanted to build a narrative of mental incompetence, then perhaps I should help her commit to that role completely. Not as her loving, supportive husband, but as her legal guardian, her conservator. The person who controlled every aspect of her life because she'd convinced the world she couldn't be trusted to control it herself. She wanted to weaponize vulnerability? Fine. Let's see how she liked being trapped in her own lie. I opened my laptop again and began a new search. How to petition for guardianship. North Carolina. Emergency conservatorship requirements. Legal guardian powers and limitations. The irony was perfect. She was building a cage for me, but if I moved first, if I moved carefully, I could turn that cage around. Make her the prisoner of her own deception. She couldn't admit the truth without exposing herself as a fraud. But staying sick would mean losing everything: her freedom, her control, her ability to be with Jason. A trap with no exit. I started taking notes, my engineering mind already breaking down the problem into manageable steps. Documentation, medical evaluations, legal procedures, witnesses, timeline. Outside my office window, the first hints of dawn were starting to lighten the sky. I'd been awake all night, but I felt more alert than I had in weeks. Jessica wanted to play games with reality? Then let's play. The consultation with the attorney wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined some sleek downtown office with glass walls and leather furniture. Instead, Patricia Brennan, no relation to Jason I'd verified, worked out of a converted house in Dilworth. Her conference room, a former dining room with crown molding and a chandelier that had probably witnessed 100 family dinners before it started presiding over the dissolution of marriages. I need to understand something first, Patricia said, setting down the flash drive I'd given her. She was in her late 50s, gray haircut and a practical bob, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. What's your actual goal here? I'd spent 3 days rehearsing this conversation. I want to protect my children and secure my assets from someone who's proven herself willing to construct elaborate lies. That's not what I asked. She leaned back in her chair. Do you want to punish your wife? Or do you want to end your marriage with minimal damage to your kids? The question landed harder than I'd anticipated. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had held Emma when she was born, that had taught Tyler to throw a baseball, that had slipped a ring on Jessica's finger 15 years ago. I want her to face consequences, I said quietly. She's not just having an affair. She's manufacturing evidence of mental illness, recruiting witnesses, building a false narrative. If I just file for divorce, she'll use this fake dementia story against me. She'll tell everyone I abandoned my sick wife. She'll use it to get custody, to get the house, to paint herself as the victim. Patricia nodded slowly. And you think filing for guardianship turns the tables? Doesn't it? She was quiet for a long moment, studying me with the kind of assessment that made me understand why she'd been practicing family law for 30 years. Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be very direct with you. What you're proposing is legally possible but ethically complicated and practically dangerous. I'm listening. North Carolina allows for guardianship when someone is proven incompetent to manage their own affairs. You have documentation of your wife claiming memory loss, confusion, inability to recall basic facts. You could petition the court, present this evidence, potentially have her evaluated. She paused. But here's what you need to understand. If you go down this road, you're not just calling her bluff. You're potentially destroying her professional reputation, her relationship with your children, and any possibility of civil resolution. She's already destroyed our marriage. I'm not defending her affair, Patricia said. I'm asking if you've considered what happens when you detonate this bomb. Your children will watch their father have their mother declared incompetent. Even when the truth comes out, and it will, they'll remember that you were willing to do this. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So I should just let her get away with it. I didn't say that. She opened a legal pad, uncapped a pen. I'm saying you have options, and you need to understand the full consequences of each one before you choose. Let's start with what you actually have. For the next hour, we went through everything. The deleted messages, the timeline of lies, the recorded conversations where Jessica claimed to forget things she discussed in perfect detail with Jason hours earlier, the text messages where she explicitly called the memory loss story insurance. Patricia took notes, occasionally asking questions, her expression neutral. When I finished, she set down her pen. Here's my professional assessment. You have overwhelming evidence of infidelity and deception. In North Carolina, we still recognize adultery as grounds for divorce, and it can affect alimony. With this level of documentation, you'd be in a very strong position for a fault-based divorce. But she'll still use the dementia story. She can try. But Mr. Mitchell, that sword cuts both ways. If she claims diminished capacity, she undermines her own credibility. If she's too mentally compromised to remember basic facts about her marriage, how is she competent to testify about anything? How is she fit to have primary custody of 2 children? I hadn't thought of it that way. More importantly, Patricia continued, if you have evidence that she's fabricating a medical condition, which these text messages suggest, that's not just lying. That's fraud. If she's claimed this to her employer, if she's sought medical treatment under false pretenses, if she's created documentation of a non-existent condition, there could be serious consequences. What kind of consequences? Depends on what she's actually done. But at minimum, it destroys her credibility in any divorce proceeding. No judge will look favorably on someone who's manufactured evidence of mental illness. She paused. The guardianship route would work, technically, but it's nuclear, and it makes you look vindictive. The smarter play is to let her keep digging her own grave. I don't understand, Patricia smiled thinly. Right now, she thinks she's being clever. She's building this narrative of cognitive decline, recruiting witnesses, establishing a pattern. She thinks it's insurance, but every time she performs confusion, every time she forgets something, she's creating evidence that can be used against her. You want me to let her keep lying? I want you to document it. Every instance, every witness, every claim. And then, when we file for divorce, we present all of it. The affair, the deception, and the calculated fraud of faking a medical condition. We don't need to have her declared incompetent. We just need to prove she's willing to lie about being incompetent. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity, and it didn't require me to become the villain in my children's story. How long? I asked. How long can you maintain the pretense of not knowing? I thought about the past 3 weeks, the spreadsheets, the surveillance, the careful performance of normalcy while my marriage rotted from within. As long as necessary. Then give it another month. Let her establish the pattern more firmly. The more elaborate her deception, the worse it looks when we expose it. Patricia leaned forward. But Mr. Mitchell, you need to be absolutely certain about this. Once we file, there's no going back. Your marriage is over. Your wife will know you've been investigating her. Your children's lives will change fundamentally. Are you prepared for that? I looked out the window at the oak tree in her front yard, its leaves just starting to turn. In a month, it would be fully autumn. In a month, Emma would be preparing for her 8th grade fall concert. In a month, Tyler would be deep into soccer season. In a month, I would destroy the only life my children had ever known. I need to ask you something, I said. Is there any scenario where this ends differently? Where I confront her, and she stops the affair, and we somehow rebuild? Patricia's expression softened slightly. Do you think that's possible? I thought about Jessica's text messages. Not just the affair logistics, but the tone. The way she talked about our marriage as something she'd outgrown. The way she discussed me as an obstacle rather than a person. The calculated nature of her deception. No, I said. I don't. Then you have your answer. She closed her legal pad. Take the month. Document everything. Don't confront her, don't change your behavior, don't give her any reason to suspect you know. And Mr. Mitchell, consider talking to a therapist. Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because you're going to need support when this detonates. I left her office with a retainer agreement and a timeline. 4 weeks. 28 days of performance, of pretending I didn't know my wife was both betraying me and constructing an elaborate fraud to protect herself from consequences. 28 days of being the fool she already thought I was. I drove home slowly, taking the long route through Myers Park, past houses where families were probably sitting down to dinner, where marriages were probably intact, where people probably still trusted each other. When I pulled into our driveway, Jessica's car was already there. Through the kitchen window, I could see her moving around, probably starting dinner. Emma's backpack was on the front steps. Tyler's bike was lying in the yard. Everything looked completely normal. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering myself. Then I picked up my phone and opened the voice recording app. Patricia had been clear. Document everything. I pressed record and walked inside. The house smelled like roasted chicken when I walked in, the recorder running silently in my jacket pocket. Jessica had prepared dinner, an actual home-cooked meal, something that had become increasingly rare over the past months. She stood at the stove, her back to me, humming softly. "You're home early," she said, without turning around. "I thought you had that site inspection." Wrapped up faster than expected. I set my briefcase down, watching her carefully. "Something smells good. Just chicken and vegetables, nothing fancy." She turned, offering me that practiced smile I'd come to recognize. "How was your day?" The question felt like a test. Everything felt like a test now. "Fine, routine." I loosened my tie. "Where are the kids?" "Emma's at soccer practice. Tyler's at Mason's house. They're working on that science project." She wiped her hands on a dish towel. "I thought we could have dinner together, just us. We haven't done that in a while." My pulse quickened. Jessica initiating quality time was unusual enough to be suspicious. I forced myself to smile. "That sounds nice. Let me change out of these work clothes." "Take your time. Dinner won't be ready for another 20 minutes. Upstairs, I locked the bedroom door and pulled out my phone. A quick check of the monitoring software showed no new activity on Jessica's devices since this morning. The last message exchange with Jason had been at 10:47 a.m. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." Same place? His response, counting the hours. Tomorrow was Thursday. According to the pattern I'd documented, that meant Amelie's wine bar at 7:30 p.m., with Jessica claiming some work obligation or evening errand. I changed into jeans and a polo shirt, checking the recorder to ensure it was still running. The small device felt heavy in my pocket, weighted with the burden of what it was capturing. Every word, every interaction, every lie, all preserved in digital format for Patricia Brennan's files. When I returned downstairs, Jessica had set the dining room table with our good dishes. Candles flickered between our plates. Wine glasses stood ready, and she was opening a bottle of Pinot Noir. "This is elaborate," I said, genuinely surprised. "I know I've been distant lately." She poured wine into both glasses, her movements deliberate. "I want to make more of an effort. We've been like ships passing in the night." Ships passing in the night. The cliché would have been touching if I didn't know what I knew. I sat down across from her, accepting the wine glass she offered. "To us," she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers, the crystal ringing clear in the quiet room. To us. The chicken was actually quite good. Jessica had always been a capable cook when she chose to be, though her career ambitions had long since relegated meal preparation to takeout and quick fixes. We ate in relative silence for several minutes before she spoke again. "David, I need to talk to you about something." My hand tightened on my fork. "What's that?" She set down her own utensils, folding her hands in her lap. The gesture struck me as rehearsed. "I've been having some concerns about my health." Here it was, the performance I'd been waiting for, the one I'd read about in her text messages. I kept my expression neutral, curious but not alarmed. "What kind of concerns?" "Memory issues, forgetting things." She looked down at her plate. "Small things at first, but it's been getting worse. Last week I completely blanked on a presentation I'd prepared. Just stood there in front of the executive team with no idea what I was supposed to say." "That sounds stressful," I said carefully. "Have you seen a doctor?" "I have an appointment next Tuesday with a neurologist." She met my eyes, and I saw what might have been genuine fear there, or a masterful simulation of it. "I'm scared, David. My grandmother had early-onset Alzheimer's. It runs in families." I knew for a fact that her grandmother had died of a stroke at 83, her mind sharp until the end. Jessica had told me the story herself years ago about how her grandmother had been doing crossword puzzles the morning she died. "That must be terrifying," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Her fingers felt cold in mine. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to worry you. I thought maybe I was just stressed, working too hard." She squeezed my hand. "But it's been happening more frequently. Yesterday, I couldn't remember Emma's teacher's name. I've met Ms. Rodriguez a dozen times." Ms. Rodriguez. Emma's teacher was named Mrs. Palmer, had been for the entire school year. Jessica knew this perfectly well. I'd seen her email exchange with the woman just 3 days ago, discussing Emma's performance in English class. "That is concerning," I agreed. "What did the doctor say when you called?" "Just that I should come in for an evaluation, cognitive testing, maybe an MRI." She withdrew her hand, picking up her wine glass. "I'm probably overreacting. It's probably nothing. Better to check it out and be sure." I took a sip of my own wine, watching her over the rim. "Do you want me to come with you to the appointment?" Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "Would you?" "I'd really appreciate that." "Of course. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." The lies came easier than I'd expected. Perhaps I'd learned from the master. "What time is the appointment?" 2 o'clock, at the Neurology Center on Providence Road. I made a mental note to verify whether such an appointment actually existed. My guess was that she'd cancel it at the last minute, claiming they'd rescheduled, or that she'd gone alone and I shouldn't have bothered. Another layer of deception to build her narrative. "I'll clear my calendar," I told her. She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd married. Warm, genuine, present. Then the expression shifted back to something more controlled, more careful. "Thank you. That means a lot." We finished dinner with lighter conversation. She asked about my current projects, and I gave her the sanitized version of my workday. She told me about a new marketing campaign her company was developing, her enthusiasm seeming authentic, until I remembered that she'd used this same campaign as cover for a meeting with Jason 2 weeks ago. Everything was performance. Every word, every gesture, every concerned expression. All of it carefully constructed to serve whatever endgame she had planned. After dinner, I helped her clean up. We moved around the kitchen and practiced coordination, loading the dishwasher, wiping down counters, putting away leftovers. 15 years of marriage had created these small choreographies, these unconscious patterns of cooperation. It struck me as obscene that we could still function so smoothly together while she was actively deceiving me. "I should pick up Emma from practice," Jessica said, checking her watch. "It ends at 8. "I'll get Tyler from Mason's," I offered. "What time do you want me to pick him up?" "Mason's mom said she'd drop him off around 8:30. You don't have to go anywhere." Which meant I'd be alone in the house for the next 40 minutes. I wondered if this was intentional, if she wanted me out of the way for some reason, or if it was simply the normal logistics of parenting. "Okay, I'll be in my office then. Got some emails to catch up on." She kissed my cheek, a brief, perfunctory gesture, and grabbed her keys. "See you soon." I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before pulling out my phone. The tracking app showed her moving south on Providence Road toward the high school where Emma's practice was held. Nothing unusual there. I went to my office and opened my laptop, pulling up the monitoring software. Jessica's phone showed no new activity. Her iPad, however, had been used at 6:23 p.m. while she'd been cooking dinner. I pulled up the log. She'd deleted another message thread. The recovery software was still processing it, but I could see fragments. "Can't keep doing this," and "need to make a decision." My hands trembled slightly as I saved the partial recovery to my encrypted folder. The full conversation would be available within an hour, the software working its way through deleted data clusters to reconstruct what she'd tried to hide. The recorder was still running in my jacket pocket, capturing silence now. 4 more weeks of this. 4 more weeks of sitting across from her at dinner, sleeping beside her at night, pretending I didn't know that every word out of her mouth was calculated for maximum advantage in whatever game she was playing. Outside, I heard a car door slam. Tyler's voice carried through the evening air, thanking Mason's mother for the ride. I closed the laptop and went downstairs to greet my son, slipping back into the role of normal father in a normal family. The performance, it seemed, was mutual now. The weekend arrived like a test I hadn't studied for. Jessica announced Friday evening that she wanted to take the kids to her mother's house in Asheville, a 3-hour drive, for what she called quality time with Grandma, while I still remember who she is. The manipulation was so blatant I almost laughed. She wanted witnesses to her deteriorating condition, preferably family members who would testify on her behalf when this all came crashing down. Her mother, Linda, had always been protective of Jessica, the kind of woman who believed her daughter could do no wrong even when presented with evidence to the contrary. "That sounds wonderful," I said, loading the dishwasher with the careful precision of a man who knew every word was being evaluated. "The kids haven't seen your mom in a while. How long were you thinking?" Jessica's eyes flickered with something, surprise maybe, that I wasn't objecting. "Just Saturday and Sunday. We'd leave early tomorrow morning, be back Sunday evening." "Perfect. I've got some project work to catch up on anyway." I dried my hands on a towel, meeting her gaze with what I hoped looked like supportive concern. Do you feel okay to drive? I could take you all up there if you're worried about... I'm fine, David. Her voice carried an edge of irritation. It's not like I forget how to operate a car. The memory issues are... They're specific things, details, not motor skills. Interesting. She'd researched just enough about dementia to sound plausible, but not enough to realize that early-onset Alzheimer's absolutely could affect driving ability. I filed that away in the mental catalog I'd been building. Of course, I said. I just want you to be safe. She softened slightly, reaching out to squeeze my arm. The touch felt like a performance, rehearsed and hollow. I know. Thank you for being so understanding about all this. I know it must be scary for you too. The sheer audacity of it stole my breath for a moment. She was actually thanking me for enabling her elaborate fraud. I managed a tight smile and excused myself to my office, closing the door before the mask could slip. They left at 7 Saturday morning. I stood in the driveway, waving as the SUV backed out, Emma and Tyler visible through the rear window. Emma waved back enthusiastically. Tyler was already absorbed in his tablet. The moment they turned the corner, I went inside and locked the door behind me. I had 48 hours. Patricia had been clear about boundaries. No breaking into locked spaces, no accessing password-protected accounts I didn't already have legitimate access to. But Jessica's home office? That was fair game. We shared this house and she'd never explicitly forbidden me from entering that room. I started with her desk. The surface was pristinely organized. A few pharmaceutical marketing awards, a photo of the kids from 2 years ago, a neat stack of industry magazines. Nothing incriminating left out in the open. She was too careful for that. The desk drawers were more promising. The top right contained the usual detritus: pens, sticky notes, business cards from conferences. I photographed several of the cards, noting that Jason Brennan's was among them, creased and worn as if it had been handled frequently. The bottom drawer held file folders. I pulled them out one by one, photographing each page with my phone. Most were work-related: campaign proposals, budget spreadsheets, performance reviews. Then, tucked behind a folder labeled Q3 Marketing Analysis, I found a spiral notebook. The handwriting was Jessica's, but looser than her usual precise script. The first few pages were dated entries, almost like a journal. July 18th. Conference ends tomorrow. Can't stop thinking about him. This is insane. I'm married. I have kids. But when he looks at me, I feel like I'm 25 again. July 24th. Met for coffee. Just coffee. We talked for 3 hours. He understands the pressure, the constant performance. David is a good man, but he doesn't get it. Jason gets it. August 2nd. I'm in too deep. We kissed in the parking garage. I should feel guilty. I do feel guilty. But also alive in a way I haven't felt in years. My hands were shaking as I photographed each page. The entries continued through August and September, documenting the progression of the affair with painful detail. Then, on September 15th, the tone shifted. Need an exit strategy. Jason says his divorce will be final by December. He wants me to leave David, but I can't just walk away from 15 years. The courts in NC favor the innocent spouse in adultery cases. I need leverage. September 18th. Brilliant idea from an article I read about a woman who faked cancer to get sympathy donations. What if I'm not well? What if I'm showing signs of early dementia? David would never suspect. He's too trusting. And if it comes out about Jason, I can claim I wasn't in my right mind. Diminished capacity. It's perfect. September 22nd. Started forgetting things today. Small stuff, David noticed. Good. Need to build this slowly, get other people to witness it. Teachers, friends, maybe even a doctor if I can find one who won't push too hard for testing. There it was, written in her own hand. Premeditated fraud, documented with the same organizational skills she brought to her marketing campaigns. I photographed every page, my phone camera clicking in the silent house. The later entries detailed her strategy with chilling precision, which symptoms to fake, how to research convincing details, ways to manipulate me into documenting her condition myself. The final entry was dated Thursday, 2 days ago. David is being so sweet about everything. Almost feel bad. Almost. But this is about survival. Jason and I deserve happiness. David will be fine. He's always fine. Steady, reliable David. He'll find someone who appreciates his boring stability. I need more than that. I need to feel alive. I set the notebook down carefully, afraid that if I held it any longer I might tear it apart. The rage was a living thing in my chest, hot and toxic. But beneath it was something colder. A crystalline clarity about what needed to happen next. Patricia had advised waiting 4 weeks. That timeline just accelerated. I spent the rest of Saturday photographing everything in Jessica's office. Her computer was password protected, but I didn't need it. The notebook was enough. By evening, I had hundreds of images backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts. Sunday morning, I drove to a FedEx office and printed copies of everything. The notebook pages, the text message transcripts, the photos from the wine bar, the timeline I'd constructed. I organized it all into a binder with tabs and section dividers, creating a document that told the story with devastating completeness. Then I made 3 more copies, one for Patricia, one for my safe deposit box, one hidden in my office at work. I was back home by noon, the evidence secured, when my phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," I answered, keeping my voice light. "How's Asheville?" "Good, good." She sounded distracted. "Listen, Mom's been noticing the memory thing. She's really worried. She thinks I should see a specialist right away." "That's probably a good idea," I said, walking through the house I'd just spent 24 hours turning into a crime scene investigation. "Did you want me to help you find someone?" "Actually, Mom knows a neurologist here, Dr. Kimberly Walsh. She's semi-retired but still sees patients occasionally. Mom called in a favor. She can see me tomorrow morning." My pulse quickened. This was either a complication or an opportunity. "Tomorrow? But don't you have work?" "I'll call in sick. This is more important." A pause. "David, I'm scared. What if it's really bad? What if I'm going to forget everything? Forget us?" The performance was flawless. If I hadn't read her notebook, hadn't seen the blueprint for this exact conversation, I might have believed the tremor in her voice. "We'll handle it together," I said. "Whatever it is, we'll face it as a family. That's what marriage means." "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," I replied, and hung up before she could hear the hollowness in my own voice. I stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, and made a decision. Tomorrow, while Jessica was performing her symptoms for a semi-retired neurologist in Asheville, I would be in Patricia's office, delivering the evidence that would end this charade. 4 weeks was too long. Every day Jessica continued this fraud was another day she manipulated our children, another day she poisoned what remained of our family with her lies. The game had changed. She'd accelerated her timeline by involving her mother and seeking an actual medical opinion. So I was accelerating mine. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that comes after a sleepless night. I sat in Patricia's office at 8 a.m., the binder of evidence between us like a loaded weapon. She'd spent 40 minutes reviewing everything, the notebook, the messages, the timeline. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. "This changes things," she said. "If she actually sees this neurologist and gets any kind of documentation, even preliminary notes, she's creating official medical records to support her fraud. That's a different level of liability." "So what do we do?" Patricia tapped her pen against the desk. "We move now. Today." I'll file for divorce on grounds of adultery and will include the evidence of fabricated illness as part of the discovery. But David, you need to understand. This is going to get ugly fast. I know. No, I don't think you do. She leaned forward. Your wife has been planning this for weeks. She's not going to surrender quietly. She'll fight, she'll manipulate, and she'll use your children as leverage if she thinks it'll work. I thought about Emma and Tyler, probably eating breakfast at their grandmother's house right now, unaware that their world was about to shatter. How do I protect them from this? Honesty, Patricia said simply. Age-appropriate honesty. They're going to hear things, see things, form their own conclusions. Better it comes from you first. By noon, the papers were filed. By 2 p.m., Jessica had been served at her mother's house in Asheville. By 3 p.m., my phone started ringing. I didn't answer. Patricia had advised me not to engage directly, to let everything flow through her office. Instead, I picked up Emma and Tyler from school myself, something Jessica usually handled on Mondays. Where's Mom? Emma asked as she climbed into the car. She's still at Grandma's. She'll be home later. I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. But when we get home, we need to have a family meeting, all of us. There's something important I need to tell you both. Tyler looked up from his tablet. Are you and Mom getting divorced? The question landed like a punch. What makes you ask that? Mason's parents got divorced last year. His dad did the same thing. Picked him up from school when he wasn't supposed to, said they needed to talk. Tyler's voice was matter of fact, but I could see the fear in his eyes. It's okay, Dad. I kind of figured. Emma was crying silently in the back seat. I pulled the car over, put it in park, and turned to face my children. Yes, I said. Your mother and I are getting divorced. The papers were filed today. Because she has that memory disease? Emma's voice was small, broken. And here it was. The moment where I could protect Jessica's lie, preserve her dignity, make this easier for everyone. Or I could tell the truth. No, sweetheart. Your mother doesn't have a memory disease. She's been pretending to have one. Emma's tears stopped. Tyler set down his tablet. Both of them stared at me with identical expressions of confusion. I don't understand, Emma said. Your mother has been having a relationship with someone who isn't me. When she thought I might find out, she decided to pretend she was getting sick. She thought if everyone believed she had memory problems, she could explain away her behavior. Say she wasn't thinking clearly. The silence in the car was absolute. That's messed up, Tyler finally said. Tyler, no, Dad, that's really messed up. She made us all worried about her. She made Emma cry because she thought Mom was going to forget who we were. And it was all fake? I'd never heard such anger in my 10-year-old's voice. Emma was shaking her head slowly. I don't believe you. Mom wouldn't do that. I have proof, Em. I wish I didn't, but I do. Then show me. I looked at my 13-year-old daughter, saw the challenge in her eyes, and made another decision. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder of photographs, found one of the notebook pages, the one where Jessica had written about faking symptoms, about manipulating me, about needing an exit strategy. I handed the phone to Emma. She read it once, twice. Her face went through a dozen expressions: disbelief, confusion, understanding, betrayal. When she finally looked up, her eyes were dry but devastated. She wrote this? Yes. And she was just lying? About everything? About the memory problems, yes. About having an affair, yes. About a lot of things. Emma handed the phone back like it had burned her. I want to go home. Jessica's car was in the driveway when we arrived. She must have driven straight through from Asheville, probably breaking every speed limit. The front door was unlocked. She was sitting at the kitchen table, the divorce papers spread in front of her. When we walked in, she stood up quickly, her face blotchy from crying. David, what the hell is this? Not in front of the kids, I said quietly. Not in front of… You had me served at my mother's house. You filed for divorce without even talking to me. Emma, Tyler, go to your rooms, please. No. Emma's voice was cold. I want to hear this. Jessica looked at our daughter, then at me, confusion crossing her features. Hear what? David, what did you tell them? The truth. Something flickered in Jessica's eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. What truth? That you're divorcing me while I'm dealing with a serious medical condition? That you're abandoning your wife when she needs you most? Mom, stop, Emma's voice cracked. We know. Dad showed us what you wrote, about faking it, about Jason. The color drained from Jessica's face. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted panic. You showed our children. You had no right. I had every right. They deserve to know why their family is ending. I'm their mother. You're a liar, Tyler said quietly. You made us think you were sick. You made Emma cry. Jessica reached for him, but he stepped back. The rejection was visible, physical. She turned to Emma instead. Sweetheart, you don't understand. It's complicated. Adult relationships are complicated. You cheated on Dad. Emma's voice was flat. You wrote about it in your notebook, about how you needed an exit strategy. That's not complicated. That's just mean. Emma, please. And the memory thing? Making us all worried? That's worse than mean. That's… She struggled for the word. That's evil. Don't say that. Don't you dare say that to me. Jessica's voice rose, and I saw her losing control of the narrative, the performance crumbling. I gave up everything for this family. My career ambitions, my dreams, 15 years of my life. Nobody asked you to, I said quietly. You made choices. We both did. But I didn't betray you. I didn't lie to you. I didn't manipulate our children. She turned on me, and I saw hatred flash across her face. You self-righteous. You think you're so perfect, so noble? You're boring, David. You've been boring for years. Every day the same routine, the same conversations, the same mediocre existence. Jason made me feel alive again. Then you should have divorced me before sleeping with him. Oh, and given up half of everything? Given up my house, my security, my children's stability? I'm not stupid. The mask was completely gone now. This was the real Jessica, the one who'd calculated every move, who'd seen our marriage as an asset to be managed rather than a relationship to be honored. Emma made a sound, half sob, half gasp. You were going to take us away from Dad. Jessica seemed to realize what she'd said, how it sounded. No, sweetheart, that's not… I just meant… You said my children, not our children. My. Emma's voice was shaking. You were planning to take us. I'm your mother. Of course you'd be with me. No. Emma stepped closer to me, and I put my arm around her shoulders. Tyler moved to my other side. I'm not going anywhere with you. You don't get to make that choice. You're 13 years old. The court will listen to her preference, I said. And Tyler's. They're old enough to have a voice in custody arrangements. Jessica looked at the three of us, standing together, united against her. I saw the moment she understood that she'd lost more than just the marriage. She'd lost her children's trust, their respect, their love. This isn't over, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You think you can turn my children against me? Use them as weapons? I'll fight this, David. I'll fight you for everything. You're welcome to try, but every move you make, every lie you tell, every manipulation you attempt, it's all going to be documented and used against you. I kept my voice calm, factual. I have a year's worth of evidence, text messages, audio recordings, your notebook detailing exactly how you plan to defraud the court. You can fight, Jessica, but you're going to lose. She grabbed her purse from the table, movements jerky with rage. I need to talk to my lawyer. Good idea. She stopped at the door, turned back to look at Emma and Tyler. You'll understand someday. When you're older, when you've been in a marriage that suffocated you for 15 years, you'll understand why I needed something more. I'll never understand lying, Emma said. And I'll never forgive it. Jessica left, the door slamming behind her. We stood in the kitchen, the three of us, listening to her car start and pull away. Then Tyler started crying. Not the quiet tears of earlier, but deep, wrenching sobs. I pulled both kids close and we stood there together while their childhood ended and something new, uncertain, and painful began. The divorce took 6 months to finalize. Jessica fought, as she'd promised, but Patricia had been right. The evidence was overwhelming. The notebook alone destroyed any credibility she might have claimed. When her lawyer tried to argue that the affair had been a symptom of genuine mental distress, Patricia presented the text messages where Jessica explicitly discussed fabricating symptoms. Jason Brennan's wife filed for divorce 2 weeks after our story became public. Jessica lost her job when the company discovered she'd falsely claimed medical leave. The professional consequences were severe. Her reputation in Charlotte's pharmaceutical marketing community was destroyed. The custody arrangement gave me primary physical custody, with Jessica getting supervised visitation every other weekend. Emma refused to see her for the first 3 months. Tyler went once, came home quiet and sad, and asked if he had to go back. I told him no. The house was sold. Jessica got her share of the assets, reduced by the adultery finding. It wasn't the punitive devastation she'd feared, but it wasn't the favorable settlement she'd planned for either. She moved to Atlanta, started over. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd found work with a smaller firm, that she'd cut her hair, changed her style, tried to become someone new. Jason Brennan sent me a letter 6 months after everything ended. It was brief. I owe you an apology that words can't adequately express. I knew she was married. I knew she had children. I told myself it was love, that we couldn't help it, that we deserved happiness. I was wrong. The damage we caused, to you, to our families, to our children, was inexcusable. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand what we did, and I'm sorry. I burned the letter. Forgiveness wasn't something I had to offer him. 2 years later, Emma was 15 and thriving. She'd made varsity soccer, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and started talking about college. She saw Jessica once a month now. Awkward lunches where they talked about school and weather and nothing that mattered. The relationship was cordial but hollow, and I could see it hurt them both. Tyler was 12 and still angry. He'd started therapy, which helped, but he'd built walls around himself that even I struggled to penetrate sometimes. He saw Jessica on holidays, grudgingly, and came home each time a little quieter. I'd sold the house and bought something smaller, more manageable. Started dating again, carefully, slowly. Nothing serious yet. I wasn't sure I trusted my own judgment anymore. But I was learning. One evening, Emma found me in the kitchen making dinner. She hopped up on the counter, something Jessica used to scold her for, and watched me chop vegetables. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you regret it? How you handled everything with Mom? I set down the knife and looked at my daughter. What do you mean? You could have just divorced her quietly, not shown us the notebook, not made it so public. We could have believed she was sick, felt sorry for her instead of angry. Would that have been easier? I thought about it, really thought about it. Easier for who? For all of us, maybe. We wouldn't have had to know how bad it was. But you would have grown up thinking your mother had abandoned you because of a disease, that she couldn't help it. That would have been its own kind of damage. Maybe. Emma was quiet for a moment. My friend Sophie's parents got divorced last year. Her dad cheated, but her mom told everyone it was mutual, that they just grew apart. Sophie thinks her dad is a great guy. She has no idea what he did. Is that what you wish I'd done? No. She shook her head firmly. I'm glad you told us the truth. It hurt, and I hated you for a while for showing us that notebook. But I'd hate it more if I found out later that you'd lied to protect her. At least this way I know who people really are. That's a hard lesson to learn at 13. Yeah? She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. But I'd rather learn hard truths than comfortable lies. You taught me that. 3 years after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Jason Brennan at a conference in Raleigh. We recognized each other instantly, though we'd never actually met. He looked older, grayer, worn down by consequences. We didn't speak, just exchanged a brief nod. Acknowledgement of shared history, shared damage, shared responsibility for the wreckage we'd all survived. I thought about stopping him, asking if it had been worth it. If the affair, the lies, the destruction of two families had delivered the happiness he and Jessica had been so certain they deserved. But I already knew the answer. I could see it in his eyes. 5 years after everything ended, Emma was 17 and preparing for college. We were sitting on the back porch of our house watching fireflies drift across the yard when she said, I think I understand Mom a little better now. I looked at her, surprised. Yeah? Not what she did. That was wrong and I'm still angry about it. But I understand feeling trapped. Like your life is happening to you instead of being something you chose. She pulled her knees up to her chest. Sometimes I look at the future everyone expects. Good college, good job, good marriage, good kids. And I feel like I'm suffocating. Like I'm supposed to follow this script and never ask if it's what I actually want. That's different from what your mother did. I know. She had choices. She could have talked to you, gone to therapy, gotten divorced honestly. She chose to lie instead. Emma was quiet for a moment. But I think I understand the feeling that made her want to run. I just hope I handle it better when it's my turn. You will, I said, because you know the cost of dishonesty now. You've seen what it does to people you love. Is that the moral of this whole thing? Don't lie? I thought about everything we'd been through, everything we'd lost and learned. The moral is that betrayal doesn't happen in a vacuum. Your mother made terrible choices, but she made them because she'd stopped seeing me as a person. I was just an obstacle to her happiness, something to be managed and eventually discarded. When you stop seeing people as human, when you start treating them as means to an end, that's when you become capable of real cruelty. Emma nodded slowly. So the moral is, what? See people as people? See people as people. Honor your commitments or end them honestly. And understand that happiness built on someone else's pain is never going to last. Did it last? For Mom and Jason? I'd heard through the grapevine that they'd tried to make it work for about a year after the divorces. Then it had fallen apart, poisoned by guilt, and the reality that a relationship born in deception couldn't survive in the light. No, I said. It didn't. Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. Good. Tyler took longer to heal. At 16, he was still carrying anger like a stone in his chest. He saw Jessica twice a year now, Christmas and his birthday, and the visits were stilted and brief. One night he came to my office where I was working on project plans and said, I don't want to see her anymore. Your mother? Yeah. I know I'm supposed to forgive her or whatever, but I don't. Every time I see her, I just remember how she lied to us, how she was going to take us away from you. I don't want to pretend anymore. I set down my pen and looked at my son, almost as tall as me now, his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. You don't have to pretend, but you might regret it later if you cut her off completely. Did you regret divorcing her? No, but that's different. She betrayed me as a spouse. She's still your mother. She betrayed us too. She used us. We were just part of her strategy. He wasn't wrong. That was the hardest part. He wasn't wrong. What if I told you that forgiveness isn't about her? I said. It's about you, about not carrying that anger for the rest of your life. That's what my therapist says. Your therapist is smart. Tyler slumped into the chair across from my desk. I don't know how to forgive her. Every time I try, I just get angry again. Then maybe you're not ready yet. And that's okay. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a choice you make over and over, and some days you won't be able to make it. Do you forgive her? I thought about Jessica, about the woman I'd married and the stranger she'd become, about the years of happiness before the betrayal and the years of healing after. I forgive her for being human, for being flawed and scared and selfish. But I don't forgive the specific choices she made. Does that make sense? Not really. I don't hate her anymore. That's probably the closest I can get to forgiveness. Tyler nodded slowly. I think I can hate her a little longer. That's fair. 10 years after the divorce, I remarried. Her name was Rachel, and she was a structural engineer I'd met at a conference. She knew my history, had heard the whole story, and loved me anyway. Emma and Tyler both approved, though Tyler took longer to warm up to her. Jessica sent a card when she heard about the wedding. It was brief. I'm happy for you. You deserve this. Jay, I almost threw it away, but Emma saw it and said, that was nice of her. Was it? Yeah, she could have been bitter. She could have tried to ruin it. Instead, she was gracious. Emma looked at me seriously. That's growth, Dad. You should acknowledge it. So I sent a brief thank you note. It felt strange, this cordial distance with someone who'd once been the center of my world. But it also felt right. The natural endpoint of a story that had started with love and ended with hard-won wisdom. The final lesson came 15 years after everything ended. Emma was 28, engaged to a man who treated her with the kind of respect and honesty I'd tried to model. Tyler was 25, working as a therapist himself, helping other families navigate the wreckage of betrayal. We were at Emma's engagement party when she pulled me aside and said, I need to tell you something. What's that? Mom called me last week. She wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not just say the words, but actually acknowledge what she did and how it affected us. I felt my chest tighten. And it was hard to hear. She cried. Talked about how she'd been selfish and cruel. How she'd convinced herself that her happiness mattered more than anyone else's. How she'd spent the last 15 years trying to understand why she'd made those choices. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. She said she didn't expect forgiveness, but she wanted us to know that she understood what she'd done. How did that feel? Honest. For the first time in 15 years, she felt honest. Emma wiped her eyes. I told her I'd think about it, about forgiving her. I'm not ready yet, but maybe someday. That's all anyone can ask. She asked about you too, if you were happy. I looked across the room at Rachel, laughing with Tyler and his girlfriend, at the life I'd built from the ashes of the old one. What did you tell her? I told her yes, that you'd found someone who deserved you, that you'd built a good life. Emma smiled. She said she was glad, that you'd always deserved better than what she gave you. For the first time in 15 years, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close. Recognition that people could change, could grow, could learn from their worst mistakes. Do you think she meant it? I asked. Yeah, Emma said. I think she did. The story of my marriage's end is not a simple tale of good versus evil. Jessica wasn't a monster. She was a flawed human being who made terrible choices and paid a terrible price. I wasn't a perfect victim. I could have seen the signs earlier, could have fought harder for our marriage before it became unsalvageable, could have handled the revelation with less anger and more grace. But in the end, the lesson isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, about seeing people as they truly are, not as you wish them to be. About understanding that betrayal is a choice, not an accident, and that the consequences of that choice ripple outward in ways you can never fully predict. My children learned that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to fully repair. But they also learned that healing is possible, that growth can emerge from pain, and that the truth, however difficult, is always preferable to comfortable lies. I learned that love alone isn't enough to sustain a marriage. You need respect, honesty, and the daily choice to honor your commitments even when they feel difficult. And perhaps most importantly, I learned that you can survive betrayal, that you can rebuild, that the end of one story can be the beginning of another, better one. Jessica learned her lessons too, though they came at a cost I wouldn't wish on anyone. She lost her family, her career, her reputation, but perhaps she gained something too. Self-awareness, humility, the understanding that happiness pursued at the expense of others is no happiness at all. 15 years after our marriage ended, I can look back on it without bitterness. The anger has faded into acceptance, the pain into wisdom. I don't regret the years we had together. They gave me Emma and Tyler, taught me what I needed in a partner, showed me the kind of man I wanted to be. And I don't regret how it ended. The truth, however painful, set us all free to become better versions of ourselves. That's the real moral of this story. Not that betrayal is unforgivable, but that honesty, with ourselves and others, is the only foundation worth building a life on. Everything else is just a performance, destined to crumble when the lights come up and the audience goes home. In the end, we all have to live with the choices we make. Jessica lives with hers. I live with mine. And somewhere in that space between regret and redemption, we all found a way forward. Not perfect, not painless, but honest. And that, finally, was enough.